Hi, everybody. Welcome. This is Desi Vijay. I'm a North-South National Team member and the coordinator for the webinars. Glad to see you all here. We have the 5 public speaking pros with us here today to talk to you. This is our 6th and the final pro session. We are really pleased to have Varun, Pooja, Sudhan, Anirudh, and Izam with us today to talk to us about their experience and answer your questions. Before I introduce to the panel and the special guest, since it's a public speaking webinar, I just thought of a joke I just received recently in one of my WhatsApp messages. It goes like this: what's the difference between a stand-up comedian and a motivational speaker? The answer is which side of the mic the depressed people are on. So we move on further. We have our president of NorthSouth, Dr. Balun Rajan, with us today and would be moderating the session as he did for all our other pro sessions. As you all know, Dr. Balun Rajan was the pronouncer of the first National NorthSouth Spelling Bee in 1993 and the distinction of being the first Indian American ever to win Scripps National Spelling Bee Championship in '85. He's a medical doctor specializing in internal medicine, sports medicine, and hospice, palliative medicine. I welcome Dr. Balu to introduce the panel to all of you.
Public speakers, you ready? All right, let's let our folks know who you all are. We'll start youngest to eldest. We'll start with Izam Karukapadat. Izam is currently a senior in Marlborough, Massachusetts. He won the National Public Speaking Tournament in 2018 and has been on his school's speech and model UN teams since 9th grade. While on these teams, he has received several awards at tournaments around New England. Anirudh Iyer. Anirudh is a second-year student at Boston College studying finance and computer science. He won the North-South Public Speaking Bee at Nationals in 2017 and placed 3rd in 2016. In high school, he competed in speech and debate, mostly in the events of congressional debate and public forum debate. In his junior year of high school in congressional debate, he placed at numerous national tournaments, including placing 8th at George Mason University and qualified for the Tournament of Champions. In his senior year, after switching to public forum debate, he ranked as high as 12th in the nation, including making quarterfinals at Yale, and again qualified to the Tournament of Champions. He also hosted and coached a nonprofit debate camp in summer of 2019. Now in college, he continues to be involved in public speaking through Boston College mock trial. Sudhan Chitgopar. Sudhan is a second-year student at the University of Georgia studying computer science and international affairs with a minor in math. By day, he loves researching the intersection of technology and policy, editing for the Finch Media Group, and tinkering with code. By night, Sudhan loves listening to indie music, podcasting, and working with organizations that make a difference. As the 2016 national champion of North-South's public speaking competition, Sudhan enjoys keeping his public speaking skills sharp by mentoring debate teams on the national circuit. After graduating, Sudhan looks forward to working in international affairs and computer science with a focus on cyber security. Pooja Joshi. Pooja is a management consultant at Bain Company in Atlanta, Georgia. She graduated with a bachelor's in public health from UNC Chapel Hill, where she was a Morehead-Cain Scholar. She participated in North-South competitions for several years and was the winner of the 2013 North-South National Championship in public speaking. In her free time, she will be found singing, writing original poetry, and planning future travels. Finally, Varun Jambunath. Varun was the North-South Public Speaking Bee national winner in 2012. He's originally from Cleveland, Ohio, and currently lives in Chicago, Illinois, where he works as a business technology consultant for Ernst Young. He graduated from The Ohio State University in 2018 with a bachelor's degree in economics. He loves traveling and trying out new restaurants. Welcome, everyone, and we will turn it over to Izam for his opening comments.
Hi, everyone. My name is Izam Kripapadat, and as was mentioned earlier, I am 17 and a senior in high school right now. And I started my public speaking journey kind of early, around 5th and 6th grade, when my mom asked one of our family friends who had been doing this public speaking for a while to help me out and kind of get me started with it. This is kind of the first tip I can give. It doesn't have to be that early, but if you know someone with public speaking experience, reaching out to them and kind of getting that mentor figure early is one of the best things you can do. So throughout middle school, I didn't do that much for speech. I enrolled in some random competitions. I had my school's competition in 7th grade that I ended up winning, and that kind of solidified the idea that I was interested in doing public speaking. But once I got into high school, 9th grade, I started to be able to learn to apply what I had learned from my years of doing casual public speaking to my school clubs, such as speech and debate, Model UN, which is another great part about this whole public speaking category. It's that if you learn something in one category, like speech or debate, it kind of applies to everything related to that. Like there's debate. I know that some people do DECA. There's normal speaking, and most of it is just completely interwoven with each other. A lot of what I learned came from talking to people who have more experience than I do, whether this be the family friend that I was talking about earlier, whether this be captains on my speech and Model UN team, just anyone that I knew that I could reach out to, and people who I knew had experience and also were able to help me get better. A lot of the things like hand gestures, like eye contact, more experienced public speakers will be able to tell you what you're doing wrong instantly as soon as they look at it. So the first thing that you want to do, and what's really helpful, is talking to someone that you know has a lot more experience than you do. The one mistake that I see most people doing is thinking that this is something you can do alone because the tournaments are alone. You're technically speaking alone. They think that it's a like a solo kind of sport, which you can, but it's a lot easier if you have kind of the support team, people that you can talk to, people that are able to tell you what you're doing wrong every time. And I'll say that when it comes to like improv, when it comes to stuff like at the NSF Nationals tournament, which was getting 30 minutes to prepare the topic that they gave us, the best thing that you can do for that is just practicing over and over again. Just give yourself different topics, random topics, just Google random speech topics and just do as many of them as you can, just to get that kind of knack for creating speeches in a short amount of time. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to a great session today.
Very good. Thank you very much. Anirudh, you're next, please.
All right. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah. Can you see the? Can you see the?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Oh yeah, you can click to the next one. So as was mentioned in the introduction, I was involved in a lot of speech and debate from a pretty young age. In 8th grade, I started with the speech and debate team in middle school. And in that, they were only giving us a few options for what events to do. But I was still pretty interested from that beginning point. And I did a little bit of the speech events, such as prose, duo, and impromptu, when I was in 8th grade, which were the ones that were offered to us. But then as we entered high school, we were given the chance to compete in debate as well. And that was something that stood out a little bit more to me, being able to, being someone who was pretty argumentative as a kid. Debate was kind of more natural fit for me. And so I did a lot of debate events like congressional debate, public forum, and extemp in high school. But I was also pretty involved in NSF from a lot of different events. And I'll mention later how not only public speaking, but some of the other events I did as a kid, like the spelling bee and vocabulary bee were also very influential in my public speaking journey. But I used to do pretty much all the events when I was a kid, spelling, vocab, math, geo. And then starting in 6th grade, I started doing the public speaking and essay bees when it was offered at the regional level. And then I went to nationals in 9th and 10th grade when they started offering it. And I won the competition in 10th grade. And so now I continue to do some public speaking stuff with mock trial in college. I sometimes judge high school debate tournaments, things like that. For me, the preparation materials was a number of different things. So when I did both NSF nationals and a lot of the competitions like extemporaneous speaking, where you had to speak for about 30, or you had about 30 minutes to prepare before giving a speech, it was really helpful to know a lot of things about the news. So watching the news, hearing stuff about other countries. When I competed, one of my topics was about, I believe it was about NAFTA, the year that I won. And so I knew a little bit about the US and Mexico, and I was able to talk about some of the things that had happened in the previous few years. And so that's probably my biggest tip that I could give is kind of keep an eye on the news, know what's going on, especially the major things that are going on, and kind of have an understanding of how the US and other countries play a role, because a lot of the topics tend to be a little bit more politically focused. I also read a lot, and this helped me with spelling and vocab as well. I used to write a lot as a kid. I used to read a lot as a kid, and I know that that was very helpful because it expanded my vocabulary, expanded kind of the way I spoke to be more like the things that I read. And so that was really helpful as a kid. And that's not something that necessarily you can do once. It's just kind of a lifestyle choice that I had as a kid that really helped me direct me towards public speaking. And as for some of the competitions that I did, it was really helpful to have really good academic websites that I could research, things like Forbes and Wall Street Journal and things like that uh, that are pretty reputable and can give you a lot of insight and learn a lot of background. So for a lot of these competitions, you want to kind of know what's going on and understand kind of both sides of these arguments, and then be able to then research it a little bit more in depth. Because for the NSF competition, you only get 30 minutes, no access to resources. And so you really need to have a background knowledge coming in to be able to compete. But just for public speaking in general, I think some of the things that Izam was talking about, like preparing, just giving speeches, impromptu speeches about different topics, political or otherwise, can be really helpful.
Thank you very much.
A lot of the tips.
Sorry,
or-
Anirudh, are you still going?
A lot of the tips and tricks that I learned that were really helpful came from some of the things that I learned when I was being coached in high school debate or went to any camps or anything like that. But one of my biggest the things that helped me the most was doing drills. There were a lot of different drills that you could ask me about later that were really helpful for public speaking. Things like distraction drills or drills where you have to condense what you spoke into specific amounts of time and things like that. And these kinds of drills were really helpful because it made me more mindful of how I was speaking and how I could change the things that I was saying to be more concise or to speak it better despite any distractions around. And that was really helpful. Some of the other drills included things like tongue twisters, rhetorical drills where I was trying to replace words with more different kinds of words that would be more descriptive. And another big thing that I noticed is very helpful for a lot of people is kind of being aware of their tone and pacing, which is something that everyone has a normal cadence and a way of speaking, but being a little bit more aware and kind of thinking about how they can space it out in a speech and be able to be most engaging, whether that's taking pauses or increasing their tone at certain times, whether it matches the emotion of something they're saying, can be really helpful in convincing a judge. And yeah, I guess my funny anecdote would be just in high school, by my senior year, by my 12th grade, I was able to have a lot more freedom in terms of what events I wanted to do. So my friends and I did a lot of fun events, like duo and multiple, which were events where we could just, even though we were all really accustomed to debate, we ended up doing some speech events where we were very much out of our depth. We had to act as different characters, and we didn't do very well, but it was a fun experience. And being able to kind of get out of my comfort zone a little bit and do some events that I wasn't familiar with was very nice.
Thank you. Sudan, you ready?
Yeah, absolutely. What's up, everyone? My name is Sudan. I'm 18 years old, and I'm currently a second year at UGA studying computer science and international affairs with a math minor. as you guys heard, I won the NorthSouth Public Speaking competition back in 2016. And the competition taught me a lot. I thought that I knew a fair bit about public speaking going in, but I think just the very act of competing was able to show me a lot about public speaking that I didn't know earlier. So I think when it comes to public speaking, people often overcomplicate it. You know, they say there's some hand gestures that you should or shouldn't use, an opening that you should always stick with. For me, public speaking has always been about storytelling. I think that as social creatures, we just love to hear stories. We love to be interested and excited about stuff. And I think the biggest question then when it comes to public speaking is how can you get people interested and excited about what you want to talk about? So I think my biggest piece of advice as you begin to prepare for this competition is to realize that there is not one book or one video or one tutorial that can teach you how to speak. I think that the very best thing that you can do is listen to the storytellers around you and the storytellers that you look up to. I think for me, that was my dad. He would always tell us stories about his childhood, and it would always be such an exciting event. I think those were probably some of the times where I laughed the hardest. And I never came away from one of these stories feeling anything but happy. And I think that's really the emotion that people should be trying to convey when they speak, is creating a fulfilling experience for the listener. And so I think my biggest piece of advice would be to find somebody that excites you, to find someone whose storytelling just evokes an emotional response within you, and to try and replicate that, right? Because I think one of the most beautiful things about the spoken language as opposed to the written language is just the idea that it is very dynamic. If you hang out with someone for, I don't know, a week or two, you'll probably pick up a lot of the turns of phrases that they use. A lot of my language is built off of the language that my parents use, my friends use, and my family uses. So if you're able to find someone that has the storytelling ability that you really admire and you listen to them enough, you will pick up a lot of their turns of phrases. As Anirudh was talking about, it does come down to practice a lot of the time. The very act of public speaking is never something you can really do without having experienced it. And so I think that regardless of who is listening to you, as long as you are saying something, sharing something, telling some sort of story, that will ultimately help you. I think one other thing that I really want to drive home is that public speaking is not for a specific group of people. Public speaking is for everyone, and everyone has these sort of experiences that they can weave into the stories that they tell that will ultimately make their speeches so much better. I remember my personal experience during the 2016 B, where I won was I was a freshman in high school. I knew very little about public speaking, to be completely honest with you. And on the entire 13-hour drive from Georgia to Florida, where the B was being held, I was listening to music. So I got into the B and I got my topic. We had 30 minutes to prepare, and all that was going through my head were song lyrics. I just could not think of anything other than the songs that I was listening to. And ultimately, the way I prepared during those 30 minutes was I wrote down the song lyrics because I had very little to go off of other than that. So I tried to weave them into my speech. Obviously, not the best way to go when you're public speaking, but I think that really drives home the point that your source of inspiration and where you pull from is largely individual, and that everyone does have a story to tell. The idea is just to be able to find that story, find a good way to communicate it, and then be able to share that with the world. That's all I got for you. I think that, you know, I wish I had something more profound to say, but I ultimately do think that public speaking is not as complicated as people make it. It's just a very personal act, and it's a very introspective one too.
Very insightful. Thank you. Pooja?
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks for having me here today, and I'm really excited to have this conversation with the fellow panelists and hopefully provide something helpful for everyone listening online. Like we mentioned earlier, my name is Pooja. I'm 23 now. I am working in Atlanta, Georgia, and graduated from UNC Chapel Hill last year. And I have done North-South Foundation's public speaking Bs in high school and actually won the 2013 B. I would say reiterating most of what has already been said, honestly, in terms of tips and tricks that can be helpful during preparation. I think everything that Anirudh, Izam, and Sudan said is super helpful, and they said it really well. A couple of things that I would add to what has been said already. I think listening to TED Talks or speeches by historical figures that you admire can be a fantastic way to learn techniques that you can keep in your toolkit or your arsenal, and just pull out when it makes sense to pull those things out. As I think Sudan was mentioning, public speaking kind of can factor into different sorts of audiences and different sorts of situations. And so as you listen to these different speeches, they're always kind of very targeted towards exactly what the speaker is trying to convey, who they're trying to convey it to, and why they're trying to convey what they're trying to convey. So if you kind of listen to these speeches that are lauded for what they've been able to provide the world, you can sort of understand, okay, who is this person talking to? What are they trying to say? And why are they trying to say that thing? And then you can sort of start to see, okay, these are the techniques that help people communicate in this certain way. These are the techniques I can use when I'm trying to say this, and kind of have that in your head as a toolkit. And then once you see your topic, when you're actually giving your presentation, you can think about, okay, these are the right techniques I should be bringing out. This is the type of vocabulary I should be using, et cetera, et cetera. So I think for me, the biggest thing was just listening to a lot of those things. And these are all freely available resources on YouTube, on other forums. Just watching the news, as Anirudh was saying, is a huge way. And it can even be people in your own life that you admire. Teachers are usually excellent public speakers. They have to do this every day, solidify a whole bunch of work that they've done into a 45-minute class period, and they do it typically very, very well. So just listening to how your teachers are communicating to you can be a great way to pick up on some of the techniques that they're using. Another thing that I would add is what Anirudh was mentioning earlier about vocabulary. That can be a huge way to add to your speeches as you start making them. Just thinking about what words can make the most sense based on the audience that you're speaking to. And sometimes it's not having a very elevated vocabulary. Sometimes you have to tone it down. If you end up one day becoming a teacher for kindergarten, you will have to be a really good public speaker, but you won't be using, GRE or LSAT vocab words. And that can change depending on your audience. So kind of thinking about that as well. And then finally, I would say I think public speaking is, of course, super important as you're preparing for these competitions. And it's wonderful that all of you are getting started early in your preparation. But I'd also zoom out and think about the value of what you're learning in the rest of your life as well. These competitions are great practice for what's coming ahead. As many of you start to think about your college applications, you'll have to be in interviews as you're going through college applications or scholarship applications or what have you. And the techniques you're learning in public speaking can help you in those interviews to communicate your skills and qualifications and your goals, and convince your interviewers that you would be a great asset to their campus, or you would make a great applicant for their scholarship. As you move forward in life and start to embark on your longer term careers, no matter what field you end up going into, these public speaking skills will be vastly, vastly important. Whether you're a doctor and you have to communicate to your patient what's going on with them and what treatment plan they have to adhere to and convince them how important that is, whether you're a business person and have to talk to investors and convince them that your business is worth investing in, whatever you end up doing, these skills will serve you for a lifetime. So investing in this skill set right now is fantastic. And so I'm really glad that all of you are embarking on that journey so early, because you'll really see that the things you're learning right now will be lessons that will last you for many, many years to come. So thank you again, and excited for the rest of the session.
Thank you, Pooja. Varun?
Sure. Hey guys, Varun here. So I know there's been a lot of good tips and info that the other panelists have shared, so I'll try and keep it as concise as possible. But yeah, just a little bit about myself. I think like a lot of the other panelists here too, I did speech and debate in high school. And I think it's really something that's been really helpful for me just kind of throughout my life, whether it's just in high school and college, post-college, like working now, like just the ability to speak in public, like everyone else is saying here, is like it's so helpful. Like like Pooja was saying, no matter what it is that you're gonna do long term, like even though this may seem like really far away, like working after college, no matter what it is, having public speaking is really helpful. And usually the people that tend to advance fastest, like in positions wherever that might be, whether it's in the medical field or whether it's in business, what have you, it's usually the people that know how to articulate and communicate very well, and people that know how to get their point across. At the end of the day, as technically proficient as you might be at whatever career it is, at the end of the day, if you can't communicate that value to other people, it's something that's going to hold you back. So I think the fact that all of you guys are getting so involved in public speaking right now is huge, and it's really going to help you out long term, just to be able to communicate at the end of the day. And it doesn't just have to be about work either. Just honestly, day to day personal relationships, your friends, like meeting new groups of people, is just a huge thing to have, because one, it really builds your confidence, it builds your ability to communicate, and it makes it very easy to get your points across and kind of just build those connections and bridges with other people. So I think in that sense, public speaking is just something that's been very very helpful for me just kind of throughout my life. So I'd say, kind of thinking about typical preparation, general tips, I'd say one thing more than anything is try to avoid memorizing speeches. I think that's kind of a trap that I fell into very early on when I got into public speaking, is I'd try to write out every single word and memorize every single one. And think that if I just put in all this time to memorize every single word, I'm going to be as prepared as possible. But really what ends up happening is you step on the stage, you see all these people, there's distractions, there's things going on. It's easy to get tripped up on different words, and the minute you start messing up what you thought you memorized, your whole speech, the flow gets ruined. So I think really trying to memorize a speech doesn't really provide that much value, and it's not something that the audience really cares about. Like whether or not you followed the speech that you wrote down to a T isn't something they're going to know about. So I think at the end of the day, the advice I'd give there is honestly just write a few bullet points about what the points you want to try and get across, and really flesh them out in your head. Like practice, obviously, like really go through it, like think about exactly how you want to phrase things, what you want to say, but don't have like a script at any point, because I think at the end of the day, the minute you start going off the script is the minute you start losing some of that confidence you might have in the speech you want to deliver. So at the end of the day, I think being concise, preparation is key, obviously. Just kind of speaking as much as you can, like maybe in front of the mirror, maybe to your family or friends, just like some sort of audience, just to kind of get in the habit of it, I think is huge. Something that really helped me, honestly, is just getting comfortable with speaking to large audiences. That's something that just kind of happens over time. So I think if it's one of those things, I mean, personally, I love being the center of attention. So I've always loved public speaking because everyone has to pay attention to me. But, I know that's not always the case. So especially if, it is, I definitely understand how it can definitely be nerve-wracking sometimes to talk to a large group of people. But I think at the end of the day, they're listening to what you have to say and they care about what you have to say. So all it really takes is just being comfortable with getting your voice across and knowing that it is something that everyone's interested in hearing. And I think that's something that can really help you too, is just knowing how to just knowing that at the end of the day, the audience is someone who's interested in what you have to say, and isn't like it's not an adversarial thing. It's not like you have to impress them. There's no pressure from that standpoint. At the end of the day, whatever you say is what they're going to listen to, and being comfortable with that and not putting a lot of pressure on yourself is something that I found really helps in public speaking performance. I'd say too, just kind of to echo what a lot of the other panelists have been saying as well, especially for the NSF competitions, and if you do decide to go the speech and debate route, like in high school or later in college, wherever it might be, I think part of it is just being well informed. I wouldn't say there's like a very specific article or journal or anything like that I'd recommend reading. I think just being aware of current events. Oftentimes when it comes to these speech competitions and things like this, usually it's something, it's a topic that's relevant to the time. It's something that's, so at the end of the day, just being aware of current events, I think is really going to be helpful. But more than anything, I think it's just learning how to speak and be comfortable with getting your points across. So honestly, just practicing, not stressing too much about it at the end of the day, and just having fun with it is kind of my general advice. But yeah, thanks.
All right, very good. So we have a question in the chat box. I'll throw it out to all of you. Do you have any recommendations for summer camps in public speaking and debate for middle school students?
Okay, so I think middle school is tough to give recommendations for, especially on the debate side of things. At least from my debate experience, a lot of them really are structured towards high school. So not to circumvent the question and not give you a debate camp, but I think one of the best things that you can do when you are in middle school and you're really interested in going the public speaking and debate route is either a program like Toastmasters. I know that they have like programs for young children that'll really get you involved in the public speaking side of things, or even just getting involved with your high school's debate team. Chances are the kids there are very, very smart, and I think the debate community has always been one of my favorite communities because everyone in the debate community is so willing to help younger children that are interested in it. They're very passionate. I would say go that route instead of looking for a necessarily like super formal debate camp.
Yeah, I can kind of agree with that in that a lot of the people in terms of when there are camps for high schoolers, they tend to be people who had already graduated, so they offer a different opinion of people who are much older and are now in college or even beyond that. Whereas a lot of the camps and programs for middle schoolers tend to be just other high schoolers who are going through the same process anyway. So it's often a lot more easier and in a way almost more convenient to just go to your own high school and kind of get through that network rather than trying to go through a formal camp that has the exact same like quality or level of resources, essentially.
Yeah, and one other thing is I found that like a lot of camps are like super specialized towards what exactly you want to do. Like I went to a Model UN camp, but that was specifically just for Model UN. I know that there's stuff like DECA camps, if that's something that you're interested in. There are specific debate camps. So a lot of your camp choice comes down to what exactly you want to pursue. So yeah, I would just say be careful about that.
I think you're muted.
You're on mute, Dr. Ball.
Sorry about that. Thank you for catching that. Do you recommend any websites that will have good topics to prepare?
It really depends. I know there are certain things, I'm not entirely sure what the website is called, but I know for extemp speaking in high school, there's some websites that have a lot of topics. But the thing with that is it very much changes every month. So things that are relevant, like from a year ago are probably not relevant anymore. So I think more than anything, just kind of picking maybe a topic. There's a lot of issues that are highly debated uh, on a government level, and kind of picking a topic like that and then kind of giving a speech on either the pro for a certain bill or con for a certain bill is an easy way to kind of pick a relevant political topic if you want to talk about it. There's also, if you really search up topics, because public speaking really doesn't depend, it really doesn't matter what you speak about if you have if it's just good practice. So there can be a lot of things, very basic things like cats or dogs or things like that, that you can very easily find a list of basic public speaking topics and speak on that. So it depends on what kind of experience you're looking for. If you're looking for just basic, any impromptu speaking just to kind of get better at giving a speech, it can be something very basic, and there's a lot of lists online for that. But if you want something more specific, either looking for extemporaneous speaking topics for this month would be relevant, or just any news issues that are like hot button issues.
Yeah, I think also the National Speech and Debate Association catalogs each of their past topics for things like extemporaneous speaking, public forum debate, congressional debate, and so on. And I think while Anirudh definitely makes a good point in that, past topics may not necessarily be as relevant, I think they do give you a good insight into the wording of the topics and the general nature of like the type of topics that are generally selected.
Yeah, something I wanted to add there too is I'd say especially if you're newer to public speaking, I'd almost say like kind of like echo part of what Anirudh was saying is honestly don't worry too much about the topic. Like especially if it's something very new, just getting comfortable talking about anything you're interested in. Honestly, I think is a great starting point. So like, just at the end of the day, I think a lot of the resources out there towards public speaking and speech and debate and Model UN, like they said, tend to be very government focused, right? It's a lot of issues about like congressional bills, model UN resolutions, and it's a very specific subset of public speaking. And I think the activities you get involved in high school tend to go that route. But at the end of the day, if it's really just public speaking you want to get good at, and if maybe you're not as interested in these kind of like, congressional issues, model UN resolutions, it's really not your thing, I think that's completely okay. I think just really just getting comfortable talking at all, it would be a great starting point. Because at the end of the day, just being able to communicate is really, I think, what the key is here. Because, 10 years from now, or 5 years from now, you're done with high school or you're done with college, you could, depending on where you go in your career, it's not always going to be about what bill is being passed or failed in Congress. It could be about anything at all, right? So I think, like you said, something simple, something you're interested in. I think the interest is key there, because you don't want this to be a chore. You don't want this to be something that stresses you out, that, you don't want to read up about something you have no idea about and then get stressed about it. At the end of the day, something you're comfortable with, something simple, I think is a great way to start and just get comfortable talking in general.
So there are a lot of how and what questions. Let's go to a why question and then get back to some how and what, right? So here's one that says, did you all do this out of your own interest, or was there some pressure from your parents when you started? Who wants to go first? I saw Pooja smile immediately, so we'll start with Pooja.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think public speaking was actually one of the things that did come out of my own interest. I don't think necessarily compared to things like math bees, spelling bees, things like that, parents don't necessarily always see the value in public speaking very, very early. So for me, it was really, I saw that this was even an offering, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. Like, I want to go do this because I love talking, and as Varun was saying, being the center of attention. So this sounds like a lot of fun. And it was kind of one thing that I did as, oh, I'm going to NSF and doing these 4 other things anyway, and I'll just tack this one on. And then it actually became my favorite experience throughout my whole time doing these bees. So I think for me personally, it came from just sort of an internal interest. But I think that's one thing where public speaking can really apply, as I was saying earlier, to any interest in your future career or whatever you want to pursue later in life. This is a skill that can come in handy. So seeing that early on is super helpful, and you can kind of think about it in the context of whatever your dreams are right now, and obviously those might change between the time you're 15 and 25 or 35, whatever. But just kind of seeing like, oh, learning these skills is going to help me do whatever I want to do 20 years down the line. So I think that's always great. And yeah, so I would say like, wherever the initial push is coming from, this is going to be a very, very valuable thing to add to your skill set. So keep running with it, I think, and it should be a lot of fun. This can be stressful to be on stage or on that podium the first time you're there, but as you get more and more comfortable with it, it will be a huge asset in your daily life toolkit as you move on.
Thank you. Anirudh, I think you also, I saw a visual response. Go ahead.
Yeah, so for me, it was kind of the same thing. It wasn't really any outward pressure of any kind. If anything, it was almost that in 6th, 7th grade, my friends were in speech and debate and I wasn't. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it at that time. I did like to speak and argue and things like that as a kid, but I didn't know what actual speech and debate competitions were like. So that was probably my first experience, was kind of being almost pushed into it because a lot of my friends were doing it. And so that might be something you notice in middle and high school, that a lot of the people you hang out with join speech and debate at your high school or middle school. And it's a nice community, and a lot of my friends ended up doing the same thing in high school, and I got to know a lot of people through it. So that was almost my best takeaway from speech and debate in high school, was that I made so many friends, not only in my own school, but in my state, and even on the national circuit with friends from other states. So if that's almost a pressure of sorts, that's probably the best pressure that you can look at it as being just meeting a lot of new people and getting a new experience that can be really helpful for you, but also have a lot of fun with it.
Okay, any thoughts from the other three?
Yeah, I can hop in here. So I think for me, the virtue of public speaking was always super interesting. I think that my parents have always been very, very supportive of just my interest in public speaking, which definitely helped me early on when I just saw this as something that was cool. And they would, spend lots of late nights, early mornings driving me to competitions. But I think that what really appeals to me about public speaking, and the reason why it should be an internal drive to do it, is that the virtue of public speaking transcends any one specific application, right? And this is something that we've talked about so much in this panel. You can be a doctor and a public speaker. You can be a musician and a public speaker. You can be an engineer and a public speaker. And the portability of this skill is just so immense that, you know, it really is just one of the things that can never let you down in life. And I think this wasn't something I realized until I was doing college applications. And I was really forced to ask myself why I'm interested in public speaking. And this is ultimately the answer that I came to.
So Sudan, was it you who mentioned about how your father's engagement kind of made this all fun? I can't remember which one of you specifically referenced that. And if that was indeed you, please speak more to that, because I would like to tie this all together.
Yeah, absolutely. So my dad was a Toastmaster. He was like Toastmaster certified. And so I think he was just really great at giving lots of speeches in front of like his colleagues or like in business settings. But my favorite, they weren't even speeches really, they were just stories, is of all of the stuff that he would get up to when he was a little kid in school. And what appeals to me so much was that no matter what the story was about, I always came away from it with this interest or intrigue or really some sort of emotion, right? And I think that really showed me the value of public speaking is in evoking emotion within the people that you are speaking to. And it's always a different emotion. Whenever my dad spoke, it always filled me with excitement. But I think later on, when I was competing in a few public speaking competitions, I was able to use the same things that I learned through his stories to evoke feelings of sadness or feelings of anger, motivation, happiness, really whatever it was. So yeah, I think my dad has really played a very big role in public speaking. He's always been such a huge support to me. And I think that really is part of my why when it comes to public speaking.
I think it's really important to take a step back and appreciate that part, right? Whether it is the five of you, or Meet the Pros for science, or Meet the Pros for spelling, or Meet the Pros for math. Thematically, what we've heard over and over again is that the kids who have been most successful on whatever stage are the ones where the families came together, right, in search of how to do this well, right? And so at some point, it stopped being about succeeding in competition and more about what was exciting about that particular sport. And I'm going to call it a sport, right? Or that pursuit of understanding of that particular academic endeavor, whatever it is. And if we take a step back and we look at the teams that are competing in March Madness, what we'll find is that those that do well, right, are the ones that get beyond that initial, I have to win, to let's have fun with this and let's learn together, right, how to enjoy this study. How do we enjoy figuring this out together? Those are the ones that really take it to the next level, because they become curious and they become collaborative. And it no longer becomes about pressure. It really becomes about learning from one another and then pushing each other to raise the standard. It stops being about the competition. It stops being about the grade. It really becomes about what is awesome about that particular academic endeavor. And so I think that the more that all of our parents and children can appreciate that and truly turn this into something collaborative that everybody's excited about and everybody's contributing to, life becomes a lot more fun and everybody succeeds in the process.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. I'd love to just add in there super quickly that in public speaking competitions, even if you go up there and you come in last place, you've gotten up on that stage and you've had the confidence to speak in front of X number of people. You've done this and you've accomplished this, and that in itself is a huge thing and something you should be proud of, no matter what your final placing is and if you've beaten everyone else or not. Even leaving the whole competition element aside, I think just building up the confidence to be able to do something like that is a huge value add and something that will serve you well moving forward. So You know, you can think about this as a competition, but I think, as you were saying, just getting past that and realizing what this is going to do for you as a person, as you're just developing that level of confidence and speaking in front of other people is huge in itself.
Yeah,
Yeah, really quick add
sorry,
to
go
that
ahead.
if I could. Our team's like motto for in high school was you were a winner the moment you stepped on the bus, because we took a bus to our tournaments, and that was something that for the last like 20 years, like every tournament we would tell that essentially. So it was just like just because you chose to compete in this event, like that, you got something out of it.
Yeah, I think you're not going to remember the trophy. As somebody that has gotten the trophy, it's been 6 years. It's sitting right over in the room next to me. When I think about that North-South competition, I pay very little attention to the award that I received at the end of the day. When I think about that competition, it really is the people that I competed against, my speech, the people that supported me, and everyone that was there when I won the award that clapped for me. It is not just a competition, it is an experience. And I think realizing that is what can really help you succeed.
Outstanding. Thank you. I'm going to take 3 questions and combine them, and then I actually want all of you to answer this if you would. So the 3 questions together are, how do you prepare for a speech? What is the best way to start your speech? And what are some ways to practice public speaking at home? And maybe we will we'll start with Izam.
I think the best way to practice public speaking at home is, like I mentioned, I mean, what I did a lot of the time is watching people who are better than me speak. And there's a lot of little things that you pick up on once they do that. Once you start watching people who are just objectively better than you at public speaking. I started watching like national finalists of MSDL. I started watching like TED Talks, as was mentioned earlier, and watching these people, even if you don't practice it yourself, you start to pick up on certain things that they do. You start to pick up on certain, let's say, hand gestures that they all do. You start to pick up on certain introductions that they all kind of do. I remember that I actually used one of the introductions, one of the like ways that someone introduced themselves that I watched online at the nationals of NSF, because I thought that it was really cool. Like I want to do that. So I think that practicing at home is helpful, but even more helpful is watching people who are better than you and trying to perfect your craft that way.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go to Anirudh.
Yeah, so I think in terms of how to start a speech, there is no one formula to it, but there are some different approaches to it. I think a lot about it is just like capturing attention. So there's many different ways, and the ways that like I was able to experience or even use, like it's a different emotion you want to evoke, the kind of whether you want the speech to be lighthearted or do you want it to be more serious. And based on that, you can have different approaches, whether telling a story that's either happy or sad, that really gets the mood going for your speech, or starting it with a statistic or something like that. But anything that really catches the attention is probably the best approach to starting a speech. For me, that meant in high school I did a lot of competitions, and so kind of like what Izam was saying, when we went to national tournaments, I would record the final rounds even if I wasn't in it, and kind of just look at what people did in terms of their introductions as well as their speeches. And I had a big Google Doc going of all the different introductions that I thought were either funny or interesting or anything that caught my attention. And I would note them down, and I would note down little sayings that people would say during their speeches and things like that, and try and work them into my own speeches at times, or take inspiration from them to make a similar introduction or piece of rhetoric or something like that in my own speeches later on. And I think that's the best way to go about it, because there's no one resource available to find all these things, and you really should be able to come up with your own over time. But having a list of other options that other people have done to kind of get an idea of what works and what doesn't is a great idea, or a great way to get it going. And I think practicing at home for me was just I would do a lot of speeches. Either for my competitions, I would practice those speeches, but not, you know, word for word, just kind of being able to do them as much off the cuff as possible. Look down at my pad as little as possible, my legal pad, or even go completely extemporaneous with them. So just practicing over and over again, either with the topic at hand or with entirely different topics, was the best way that I was able to practice, because once I got into the flow of things and was able to put the pieces together in a way that made sense, it was a lot easier when I was, if forced in a time crunch, to look at different parts, being like, this is the intro, this is the main arguments I need to talk about, this is the conclusion, and then having an idea of how I want to structure them makes it very easy to give a speech, even if you don't have a lot of time to prepare.
Very good. Sudan.
Yeah, so I think Izam and Anirudh talked a lot about watching other people. I think I also want to stress the importance of watching yourself. I think that one of the most helpful things that I have ever done when it comes to public speaking is set up like a smartphone or a camera and just record myself talking to the camera and watching that recording. I think that oftentimes we can learn so much just by taking on another person's view and seeing how we are speaking, the hand gestures that I used, the openings that I gave. I was able to nitpick my own speeches in order to better understand how to give them. I think one other thing that's important when it comes to the opening of a speech is a lot of the times after you give a speech, people might not remember the exact words you said, but they will certainly remember the emotions that they felt when that speech was given to you. But I think it's important to always consider what emotion you're going for. What is it that you want to evoke in your listeners, and to start off by setting the groundwork for that emotion.
Excellent. You're becoming thematic here in your emotive approach, Sudan. That's good. Pooja.
Yeah, I think all of those were really great tips on preparation strategies. I think when you're kind of sitting in that room and you get your topic and you have those 30 minutes to prepare before giving your speech, a couple of just really tactical tips I would say that were helpful for me personally. One, once you read that topic, just kind of writing down, here are all the things I know about this topic. Here's what I've read in my history classes. Here's what I've seen on the news. Here's what I've seen my dad talking about. Here's what I've seen my mom talking about, or just whatever I know about the topic, and just sort of writing down, here are the pieces of evidence that I have, and then kind of coming up with your arguments based on what you know and based on where you can add in the most big picture information as well as personal anecdotes that may be relevant. So I think that can be a great way to start off with. Here's just a bunch of information that I can now draw from as I'm putting together my speech in the next few minutes here. Other than that, I would say what everyone's been saying so far, watching other speeches is hugely helpful to just understand some of those techniques that people have used in the past that have been really successful with communicating and connecting with audiences is helpful. And just kind of thinking about, okay, which of those techniques makes the most sense here based on whatever I'm trying to convince my audience of in this case. As Sudan was kind of mentioning, that emotion piece can be hugely helpful, and bringing in personal anecdotes can help you draw out those emotions. So if there's something that's happened in your life that's relevant to the topic, definitely talk about that, because that can be an opportunity to really connect with the people sitting in front of you versus spouting out a bunch of statistics, which don't always offer the opportunity to bring out some of those more emotive elements. So I would say those were just a couple of ways that I found to be really helpful as you're kind of sitting in that room, feeling a bit nervous, staring at the clock, preparing for giving the speech.
Okay, Varun.
Well, yeah, I got two main tips here. One, a general public speaking tip that I think has helped me, and then one that's kind of a little bit more specific to this competition. So starting with the more general tip, I think more than anything, for me, the biggest thing that was helpful is just getting feedback on my performance. So kind of like Sudan was talking about earlier, whether it's maybe filming yourself and kind of seeing how, what you look like on video, or maybe it could be just getting a family member or a friend to kind of watch your speech has been hugely helpful. Because one thing that I tend to do back in the day is I tended to speak very fast for my speeches. Like I would just speed through everything. And it wasn't something I really realized. Like in my head, I thought I was speaking completely fine, when in reality, it was kind of hard to understand a lot of what I was saying because of how fast I was talking. Also, a lot of the impact of my points was lost because there wasn't any effective pausing. There was no way for me to really engage my audience. There's a lot of little things that can really help your speech, like, go to the next level that I didn't realize I wasn't doing. And the way I kind of realized that this was something I needed to work on was by having other people watch me and then let me know, hey, like your speech was good, but you could have paused a lot more and really tried to engage me more, because I didn't really feel like you were talking to me. It felt like you were just reading off something, right? Something like that. And I think a lot of times just having someone else watch you can kind of allow you to find out a lot of different things you can improve on that you probably wouldn't have caught yourself. So I think that's key. So in your preparation, I think definitely having feedback of some sort is going to be huge, just as a general public speaking tip. And then the other tip I kind of have more specifically for this competition, especially because it's very extemporaneous, right? You're given the prompt, you have a set amount of time to prepare a speech, and then you have to deliver it right after that, right? Like you don't have any time to prepare overnight, anything like that. So in a situation like this, I think what's the skill here that really helps is being able to think on your feet. So I think part of this, preparing for a competition like this, is doing something similar like at home. Like, maybe have your parents or maybe even yourself just find a random topic online. Don't really think too much about it, and then set a timer for like 20 minutes or 30 minutes. You can start by giving yourself more time than needed, and then over time gradually get shorter and shorter. And then eventually you'll find that when you get good at the skill of like, okay, I have this topic, I have a very short amount of time to prepare. I think shaving down that time will really help you set yourself up for this competition, because it's extemporaneous. You don't have a chance to prepare. It's not like you have a computer in front of you and can do all this research. You really got to be able to think on your feet. And I think it's a very good skill to have. It's something I use pretty much every day at work, to be honest. Almost like all of my meetings right now, we'll come out with a set agenda of what we want to discuss, and almost every single time, like the client or our audience goes completely off topic and into something completely different, but you're still expected to have that conversation going. You're still expected to be knowledgeable in what they're talking about and have an answer for what they're asking. So it's definitely something that, even though it's a very specific thing to this competition, it's a skill that you kind of use throughout your life and your career. So I think really just getting good and comfortable with thinking on your feet is something that'll really help you out, both for this competition and long term. So just any way to prep for that, by getting a topic, setting a timer, and then kind of preparing for that, I think could be helpful.
Yeah, so if I'm going to pull all that together, right, based on the input you've all given, right, what you've talked about is watching others, and then also recording yourself, right, making sure that you get feedback from others as well as look for your own feedback. We talked about emotions evoked versus having your take-home points right out of the gate versus both is optimal, and you have to be able to practice thinking on your feet. So if I look at this practically, right, I think that when you're watching other people speak, right, optimally, it is important to practice not just speaking, right, but practice clarity of thought. In other words, when you're watching those speeches, right out of the gate, okay, what are the three things that this person is trying to deliver, and what is the emotion they're trying to evoke? And if we practice as we're observing others, then we start observing, even in life, when other people are speaking, what emotion is this person bringing out in me, and what are the points they're trying to make? And so then when we're handed a topic, right, it becomes habit for us to look at, okay, what are the points I want to make, and what emotions will I use, or what emotions will I evoke in delivering my point? And if we then come full circle to what Varun and others have said, right, the ability to communicate will impact whatever we are doing. And how will that actually work? By knowing what is the point we want to deliver and what is the emotion we want to evoke. And that is whether we're one-on-one, that's whether we're writing, that's whether we're in front of 2,000 people. And that is the greatest skill set of all that we can walk away with.
Yeah, before we move further, I just wanted to announce that Pooja had to leave. She had some other conflict at 1 o'clock. So she personally wants to thank every one of you for giving her the opportunity. And also, if any of you have any specific questions for Pooja, please post it or send an email. We will try to get her to answer for that for you.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
We just have a couple of more posted questions, a bit more nuts and bolts. One of them is, I've registered for the competition for the first time. What should I expect in terms of topics, structure, etc.?
I don't know if anything has changed since the last time I did it, but for in terms of structure, it's basically you have 30 minutes to prepare. They give you your topic, and also I really like how they do it fairly, in where if you go last, you don't get extra time. It's basically like a rotating thing, where if you're the last person going, they're going to give you your 30 minutes separate from other people. So in the end, everyone gets exactly 30 minutes. In terms of topics, it can really be anything. Like I remember that my first year's topic was something about like writing a letter to your principal. I found that middle school versus high school topics vary a lot. Middle school topics tend to be more like light, while the high school topics tend to be a bit heavier. But nothing that would make you surprised, I guess. Everything can be prepared for, everything can be expected. So yeah.
I think one thing I've always found appealing about the North-South topics is that I'm forced to be creative but practical at the same time. I need this real world knowledge, and I need to know how things work. Current events, just practical things. But then I also need to be able to apply some sort of creative spin on it. So I think that is important to consider topic-wise.
Anyone else?
Yeah, more basically just the same as they said. I remember the two times when I went to nationals for it, they were both like relatively political topics. I think one was about the election in 2016, and then 2017 was about free trade or something like that. That's just what I remember. So basically, just being aware of that side of politics. It's nothing super niche that most people wouldn't know about. Just pretty relevant political topics and fairly broad as well. So if you know something about it, you can, as Sudan said, get creative and focus on one specific aspect that you're more knowledgeable about. And it's really just about speaking well, convincing the judges of what you're talking about, because it's not so much a prove you're correct type of topic or get every argument that's important out. It's more just kind of, what do you know about this and how can you convey it?
Yeah, and something else with that, when it comes to like political topics, I did have a political topic for my nationals. The one time I went to nationals, and the one thing there is like it doesn't matter what you say in terms of politics. Like when I was there, I was just kind of thinking, there are 30 people who are incredibly good at public speaking here, all talking about this one topic. What could set me apart? And I took a stance politically that I assumed that no one else would take, and I feel like that did have a part in why I won. So don't be afraid to be different. I know that some people, it's not the best idea to talk about something you don't necessarily agree with. But in some cases, it's best to do that, because you just have to be different. That's the way that you set yourself above, I guess. The only option there is to be different, especially when it comes to political topic and the responses of other people is predictable. It's easy to be different. If that makes sense.
Okay. So while we're on the topic of politics, how do you participate in Model UN?
So I am actually on the executive board for the UGA Model UN team. I did Model UN back in high school. Participating in Model UN is always an experience. I absolutely love it. The first thing I would do is check whether or not your middle school or high school has a Model UN team. Chances are they do. If they don't, you're really left with two choices. Either make one, which I highly recommend because you'll learn a lot about the back end of Model UN, sort of how it's run, how to run a club, or find another organization that teaches Model UN. And I think one important thing that I have found, especially with Model UN, is for the first month, you are not going to have any idea what's going on. It is a very complicated sort of world that you're put in, and we do all sorts of formal procedures. But that's also the thing that I've found to love the most about it, is that when you really do throw yourself in it, and when you do find an organization, you will learn so much more about the world and international affairs than you could possibly imagine. I think it's one of the big reasons why I'm majoring in international affairs now, and it's something that I would highly recommend.
Okay, anyone else?
Yeah, to go off that, I'm on my school's board for Model UN, and Model UN has impacted my life in a huge way. I actually wrote my college essay on it. But if your school doesn't have a team, you can also contact other schools and ask to be registered on their team. I know that someone on our team goes to Mass Academy, and they don't have a Model UN team. So they just come to ours. They come to tournaments, stuff like that. I would definitely recommend joining Model UN. Like the previous speaker said, it's the reason why I also went in, or chose to go into political science, international relations, because that's kind of the stereotypical major that people who do Model UN go into. So if you're interested in politics, international affairs, it's definitely the club for you.
Outstanding. All right, we have a little time left. We will start with Izam and go in reverse chronological order. Final thoughts.
I mean, just to start it off, it is great that you're all here. Getting that baseline interest for public speaking, in 20 years, I've been told that I'm gonna thank myself. I think that you guys should all keep in mind that you're going to thank yourself in 20 years when you have to give a presentation to your company's board and you start thinking about the public speaking that you did when you were 15, 16, 17 years old. This is a skill that will be with you all your life, and it's a skill that a lot of people don't have, and it's going to set you apart. I think that there was the survey that said that 40%, 50% of Americans have a fear of public speaking. And getting over that is a huge thing. Yeah, it's just great that everyone is here today, and thank you.
Anirudh.
Yeah, a lot of the same stuff that Izam just said. I think that the most important thing is just getting as much experience, kind of understanding what within public speaking you're interested in, because in high school debate, a lot of our alumni come back to judge. There are a lot of alumni that have been out for 10 years and they still show up to tournaments every now and then to judge, to coach, all that sort of stuff. So the community is very, if you choose to go down that path, the community is very tight knit, and people really understand what they got out of it, even 10 or 15 years down the line, and they still want to give back because they gained a lot of it, and they're able to use that in their lives. But I think right now, at the age that many of the children watching this might be at, it's really about kind of figuring out, getting out of your comfort zone, doing public speaking events, whatever that may be, just being able to get a baseline interest in speaking, whether that's about something you're interested in, something you're not interested in, politics, so many options. But then beyond that, for the next up until college or even through college, it's really about picking the experiences that you think you'll get the most out of, and the things that you'll enjoy the most, whether that's within high school debate or high school speech and debate where there's so many options, whether that's more humorous speeches, sad speeches, debate, extemporaneous speeches. There's a whole variety of it, and there's also other activities like mock trial or Model UN, and really being able to kind of just try whatever interests you, put your time into that, see what you like, and just try and be as involved as possible, because at the end of the day, it's not so much, those activities will only last for a few years, and you may never be able to use in that specific application ever again, but the lessons you'll be able to learn from it, the skills you'll be able to get out of it, the areas of real world application you might become more interested in, whether that's learning more about politics, learning more about, and a lot of people do end up picking what they do in college and even beyond, like their majors, from some of the activities they have because they realize they're interested in politics or they're interested in economics from something that they did in debate. So really getting the most out of that experience, but also just kind of enjoying it as it goes. I know when I was a senior, my last speech when I gave it on the bus ride back from States was just, it goes by really fast, and 4 years for it just isn't a blink of an eye. So really savoring what you get out of it, making friends in the experience, and really like just enjoying your time. Don't treat it as something that you need to win all the time at, or even worry about the trophies at all at any point of it. Just worry about having fun, and at the end of the day, you'll be able to, whether or not you're actively thinking about it, you'll see the difference that you got out of it, and you'll be able to use that in a lot of different ways.
Cool. Thank you. Sudan.
Yeah, so I would say get excited. If you're a kid, get excited about public speaking. I am so passionate about it. I could talk to you guys all day about it if you let me. And I think, it's easy to be scared of public speaking. It's easy to find it to be a nerve-wracking activity. But once you get excited about it, you start talking to other people about it. And in all of like the communities that I've been a part of, public speaking has been one that has just had such amazing people. I've learned so much from these people. And if nothing else, then they've taught me a lot. I think the same goes for parents. If you're a parent that's watching this webinar, get excited. I cannot stress enough how much my mom and dad helped me through this process just by being excited about the same thing that I was excited about. I think one thing that I loved about the North-South competition specifically was that it really is just a family activity to some extent. There is this like family notion to it. And I think it's just so much better when you're excited about it. That's my one takeaway.
Love it. That's great. Varun.
Yep, a lot of great points said, and I think we're all kind of stressing the same thing, which I'll kind of repeat again here, which is really how key the skill is and how useful it is, like throughout your life, like in your career, also just day to day, like meeting new people, being able to kind of make new friends. It's such a huge key skill, and being able to communicate your thoughts effectively, being able to get ideas across is ultimately what's going to help you the most long term. So like everyone else has already said, whether or not you win the trophy at this national competition doesn't mean too much in the grand scheme of things. Like, 10 years from now, that's not what we're going to remember. What you are going to remember is all the skills that you kind of learned and developed along the way. And that's what you're going to be using throughout the rest of life. And I think that's a lot more valuable than just winning that first place prize. So I'd say, whether it's at your local chapters, the national chapter, wherever you end up competing, even if you don't win, I just want to say, don't get discouraged, because at the end of the day, like everyone's already said before, just doing it is the first step, and doing it itself is going to set you up for success long term. Again, the thing that we notice the most is the people that tend, at least for my, to talk from a career perspective, the people that tend to advance the most in their careers are the people that can effectively communicate ideas, that can effectively talk and present themselves. Because you can be the best, coder out there, you can have the technical proficiency, you can be the best person at a specific field, but at the end of the day, if you can't convey your ideas well and you can't relate ideas to people, if you can't make people feel a certain way, you're going to be limited long term. So I think getting into this activity is really going to help you out in so many different ways. But
it's never too late. Someone's asking about starting in junior year, and it's never too late. I mean, that's the point here is, if we're looking at this in the context of winning versus not, yeah, maybe there's later, right? But the bottom line is these are skills that go with you, right? And Varun, you talked about work, right? But the same holds true, right? In non-work situations, if you're trying to, get someone elected to the Board of Education, if you're trying to, get someone to, come to your place of worship with you, right? Like it is, whatever is the endeavor, our ability, right, to get people to participate in North-South events is directly related to the way that we communicate. It's as simple as that. And so life becomes a lot more enjoyable, right, when we succeed, and success is very much tied to our ability to communicate. So it's never too late at all to be able to engage in this. Very good. Desi Vijay, may I ask you to pull up my closing slides?
It's coming.
All right, very, very good.
Are you able to see?
Yes, I'm ready. Go to the next slide. So to all of our panelists and to our participants, just a reminder, we can go to the next slide.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. Just a reminder, right? I think we've just closed on this, right? Success is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And we at NorthSouth really look at life as a marathon. In fact, on the next slide, I'll illustrate exactly what I mean by that. So we think of everything we do in the context of three things: empathy, education, and excellence. And so if we decide that we're going to participate in something like public speaking, then we've got training methodologies for it, right? So think of it like you're running a 26-mile marathon. It takes 6 months or more to practice for that marathon. So here in our public speaking marathon, we might join coaching classes. There's some really good ones, especially last summer we had, and we're going to be redoing those this summer. There might be prep clubs, and then there's practice. And we talked a lot today about practice. Those practice activities can be at home. Those practice activities can be at NorthSouth. We've got workshops where we get to take a little bit of a deeper dive in these. And then we've got our contests, and our contests are coming up here in April as well as May. And at the end of that, you might get a medal that said you participated. You might get a score that puts you in the first three, so you may get a trophy. But then when you're done, you're not done. You start all over again. You go right back into that cycle, because any good marathon runner that I know, some of them will say, I just want to cross it off the list, but many will say, I want to do better than last time. So they get back and they do it again. Just like somebody who is on the Peloton, for example, they want to beat their score last time, or they want to beat their friends, and everybody starts elevating the standard. So you go through this cycle over and over again, because life is a marathon, and our definition of success is not what we do one time, but rather how we contribute to all of those goals, including empathy, because the nice side effect of what we do here is our fees contribute to people getting an education who couldn't otherwise afford it, either here in the United States through our devices project, or in India, which is now over 20,000 scholarships we've given away over the past 30 years. Next slide, please. So if you want to be a success in public speaking like our speakers, then you get a chance to participate in our upcoming contests as part of your practice.
Sorry, something happened.
And those contests are coming up in the second week of April, as well as the last weekend in April going into May. So you can go to northsouth.org and you can find the register now button. There's also a homepage that links you to the contests as well. So I will simply say at the end here, right, reminding everyone that success is a marathon, not a sprint. I think our speakers have been able to tell us exactly that. I wish everybody a wonderful day and wonderful spring ahead, and hoping that you are comfortable delivering your take-home points and evoking emotion in everything that all of you do.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you for participating and all your time today, and motivating all the youngsters. Thank you for all the audience. We did conduct 6 sessions with the pros with various subjects, and our intent is to encourage you, every one of you, to compete, learn, excel. If you learn something from all these pros, is that they all started as a regular kids, failed a few times in the beginning, but determined to continue and compete, developed their work ethics and grit, and saw success that followed. It helped them with their schoolwork. It helped them with their getting into better colleges and thrive in those colleges, as well as many other successes in life. The point is not just being a champion, but to compete. That's what we learned over and over again. So I want every one of you to take that path of competing as a first step. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for the continued support. We will all see you next time.